Hello and welcome to another night of Liberty Readers. We are getting closer and closer to the end, and certainly we're in an interesting moment where we find ourselves with Lucy, Peter, Edmund, and Susan on their way to try to rescue Prince Caspian. And they've had an encounter, well, at least Lucy has, with Aslan. And we're going to see if the others are going to believe her and follow what she's seeing and experiencing with Aslan, or if they're going to do like they did in the first book and kind of ignore her. And remember, Edmund made a great deal of fun with her and got all locked up with the evil queen. So it looks like in this book, Edmund's learned his lesson for sure, and he's taking Lucy pretty seriously. But let's see what happens with Peter and Susan, and let's see if they can help Prince Caspian out. So let's get started. Chapter 11. The Lion Roars. When the whole party was finally awake, Lucy had to tell her story for the fourth time. The blank silence which followed it was as discouraging as anything could be. "I can't see anything," said Peter, after he had stared his eyes sore. "Can you, Susan?" "No, of course I can't," snapped Susan. "But there isn't anything to see." "She's been dreaming. Do lie down and go to sleep, Lucy." "And I do hope," said Lucy in a tremulous voice, "that you all will come with me. Because I have to go with him, whether anyone else does or not." "Don't talk nonsense, Lucy," said Susan. "Of course you can't go off on your own. Don't let her, Peter. She's being downright naughty." "I'll go with her if she must go," said Edmund. "She's been right before." "I know she has," said Peter. "And she may have been right this morning. We certainly had no luck going down the gorge. Still, at this hour of the night? And why should Aslan be invisible to us? He never used to be. It's not like him. What does the DLF say?" "Oh, I say nothing at all," answered the dwarf. "If you all go, of course, I'll go with you. And if your party splits up, I'll go with the High King. That's my duty to him and King Caspian. But if you ask my private opinion, I'm a plain dwarf who doesn't think there's much chance of finding a road by night where you couldn't find one by day. And I have no use for magic lions when they are talking lions and don't talk, and friendly lions, though they don't do us any good, and whopping big lions, though nobody can see them. It's all blige and beanstalks as far as I can see." "He's beating his paw on the ground for us to hurry," said Lucy. "We must go now. At least I must." "You've no right to force the rest of us like that. It's 4-1 and you're the youngest," said Susan. "Oh, come on," growled Edmund. "We've got to go. There'll be no peace till we do." He fully intended to back Lucy up, but he was annoyed at losing his night's sleep and was making up for it by doing everything as sulkily as possible. "On the march, then," said Peter, warily fitting his arm into his shield strap and putting his helmet on. At any other time he would have said something nice to Lucy, who was his favorite sister, for he knew how wretched she must be feeling, and he knew that, whatever had happened, it was not her fault. But he couldn't help being a little annoyed with her all the same. Susan was the worst. "Supposing I start behaving like Lucy," she said, "I might threaten to stay here whether the rest of you went or not. I jolly well think I shall." "Obey the High King, your Majesty," said Trumpkin, "and let's be off. I'm not to be allowed to sleep. If I'm not to be allowed to sleep, I'd as soon march as stand here talking." And so, at last they got on the move. Lucy went first, biting her lip and trying not to say all the things she thought of saying to Susan. But she forgot them when she fixed her eyes on Aslan. He turned and walked at a slow pace about 30 yards ahead of him. The others had only Lucy's directions to guide them, for Aslan was not only invisible to them, but silent as well. His big cat-like paws made no noise on the grass. He led them to the right of the dancing trees. Whether they were still dancing, nobody knew, for Lucy had her eyes on the lion and the rest had their eyes on Lucy, and nearer the edge of the gorge. Cobbles and kettle drums, thought Trumpkin. I hope this madness isn't going to end in a moonlight climb and broken necks. For a long way, Aslan went along the top of the precipice. Then, when they came to a place where some little trees grew right on the edge, he turned and disappeared among them. Lucy held her breath, for it looked as if he had plunged over the cliff. But she was too busy keeping him in sight to stop and think about this. She quickened her pace and was soon among the trees herself. Looking down, she could see a steep and narrow path going slantwise down into the gorge between the rocks, and Aslan descending it. He turned and looked at her with his happy eyes. Lucy clapped her hands and began to scramble down after him. From behind her, she heard the voices of the others shouting, "Hi, Lucy! Look out, for goodness sake! You're right on the edge of the gorge! Come back!" And then, a moment later, Edmund's voice saying, "No, she's right. There is a way down." Halfway down the path, Edmund caught up to her. "Look," he said with great excitement. "Look! What's that shadow crawling down in front of us?" "It's his shadow," said Lucy. "I do believe you're right, Lou," said Edmund. "I can't think how I didn't see it before. But where is he?" "With the shadow, of course. Can't you see him?" "Well, I almost thought I did for a moment. It's such a rum light." "Get on, King Edmund, get on," said Trumpkin's voice from behind and above. And then farther behind and still nearly at the top, Peter's voice saying, "Oh, buck up, Susan. Give me your hand. What a baby could get down there. And do stop grousing." In a few minutes they were at the bottom, and the roaring of the water filled their ears. Treading delicately like a cat, Aslan stepped from stone to stone across the stream. In the middle he stopped, bent down to drink, and as he raised his shaggy head dripping from the water, he turned to face them again. This time, Edmund saw him. "Aslan!" he cried, darting forward, but the lion whisked around and began padding up the slope on the far side of the rush. "Peter! Peter!" cried Edmund. "Did you see?" "I saw something," said Peter, "but it's so tricky in this moonlight." On we go, though, and 3 cheers for Lucy. I don't feel half so tired now either. Aslan, without hesitation, led them to their left, farther up the gorge. The whole journey was odd and dreamlike. The roaring stream, the wet great grass, the glimmering cliffs which they were approaching, and always the glorious, silently pacing beast ahead. Everyone except Susan and the dwarf could see him now. Presently they came to another steep path up the face of the farther precipices. These were far higher than the ones they had just descended, and the journey up them was long and tedious zigzag. Fortunately, the moon shone right above the gorge so that neither side was in shadow. Lucy was nearly blown when the tail and hind legs of Aslan disappeared over the top. But with one last effort, she scrambled after him and came out, rather shaky-legged and breathless, on the hill they had been trying to reach ever since they left Glasswater. The long, gentle slope, heather and grass, and a few very big rocks that shone white in the moonlight, stretched up to where it vanished in a glimmer of trees about half a mile away. She knew it. It was the hill of the stone table. With a jingling of mail, the others climbed up behind her. Aslan glided on before them, and they walked after him. "Lucy?" said Susan in a very small voice. "Yes," said Lucy. "I see him now. I'm sorry." "That's all right. But I've been far worse than you know. I really believed it was him. Yesterday, when he warned us not to go down to the firwood, and I really believed it was him tonight, when you woke us up. Deep down inside. Or I could have, if I'd let myself, but I just wanted to get out of the woods, and I don't know. And whatever am I going to say to him? Perhaps you won't need to say much, suggested Lucy. Soon they reached the trees, and through them the children could see the great mound, Aslan's Howl, which had been raised over the table since their days. Our side don't keep very good watch, muttered Trumpkin. We ought to have been challenged before now. Hush! And the other four, for now Aslan had stopped, and turned and stood facing them, looking so majestic that they felt as glad as anyone can who feels afraid, and as afraid as anyone can who feels glad. The boys strode forward. Lucy made way for them. Susan and the dwarf shrank back. Oh, Aslan, said King Peter, dropping on one knee and raising the lion's heavy paw to his face. I'm so glad, and I'm so sorry. I've been leading them wrong ever since we started, and especially yesterday morning. My dear son, said Aslan, and he turned and welcomed Edmund. Well done, were his words. Then after an awful pause, the deep voice said, Susan? Susan made no answer, but the others thought she was crying. You have listened to fears, child, said Aslan. Come, let me breathe on you. Forget them. Are you brave again? A little, Aslan, said Susan. And now, said Aslan in a much louder voice, with just a hint of roar in it, while his tail lashed his flanks. And now, where is this little dwarf, this famous swordsman and archer, who doesn't believe in lions? Come here, son of earth, come here. And the last word was no longer the hint of roar, but almost the real thing. Race and wreckage, gasped Trumpkin in the ghost of a voice. The children, who knew Aslan well enough to see that he liked the dwarf very much, were not disturbed. But it was quite another thing for Trumpkin, who had never seen a lion before, let alone this lion. He did the only sensible thing he could have done, that is, instead of bolting, he tottered toward Aslan. Aslan pounced. Have you ever seen a very young kitten being carried in the mother cat's mouth? It was like that. The dwarf hunched it up in a little miserable ball hanging from Aslan's mouth. The lion gave him one shake, and all his armor rattled like a tinker's pack, and then, hey presto, the dwarf flew up in the air. He was as safe as if he had been in bed, though he did not feel so. As he came down, the huge velvety paws caught him as gently as a mother's arm and set him, right way up too, on the ground. Son of Earth, shall we be friends? Asked Aslan. Yes, panted the dwarf, for it had not yet got its breath back. Now, said Aslan, the moon is setting. Look behind you. There is the dawn beginning. We have no time to lose. You three, you sons of Adam and son of Earth, hasten into the mound and deal with what you will find there. The dwarf was still speechless, and neither of the boys dared to ask if Aslan would follow them. All three drew their swords and saluted, and then turned and jingled away into the dusk. Lucy noticed that there was no sign of weariness in their faces. Both the High King and King Edmund looked more like men than boys. The girls watched them out of sight, standing close beside Aslan. The light was changing. Low down in the east, Aravir, the morning star of Narnia, gleamed like a little moon. Aslan, who seemed larger than before, lifted his head, shook his mane, and roared. The sound, deep and throbbing, at first like an organ beginning on a low note, rose and became louder, and then farther louder again, till the earth and the air were shaking with it. It rose up from that hill and floated across all Narnia. Down in Miraz's camp, men woke, stared palely into one another's faces, and grasped their weapons. Down below in the great river, now at its coldest hour, the heads and shoulders of the nymphs and the great weedy bearded head of the river god rose from the water. Beyond it, in every field and wood, the alert ears of rabbits rose from their holes. The sleepy heads of birds came from under wings, owls hooted, vixens barked, hedgehogs grunted, the trees stirred. In towns and villages, mothers pressed babies close to their breasts, staring with wild eyes. Dogs whimpered. The men leaped up, groping for lights. Far away, on the northern frontier, the mountain giants peered from the dark gateways of their castles. What Lucy and Susan saw was a dark something coming to them from almost every direction across the hills. It looked first like a black mist creeping on the ground, then like the stormy waves of a black sea rising higher and higher as it came on, and then at last, like what it was, woods on the move. All the trees of the world appearing to be rushing toward Aslan. But as they drew nearer, they looked less like trees, and when the whole crowd, bowing and curtsying and waving thin, long arms to Aslan, were all around Lucy, she saw that it was a crowd of human shapes. Pale birch girls were tossing their heads. Willow women pushed back their hair from their brooding faces to gaze on Aslan. The queenly beeches stood still and adored him. Shaggy oakmen, lean and melancholy elms, shook-headed hollies, dark themselves, but their wives all bright with berries, and gay rowans, all bowed and rose again, shouting, Aslan! Aslan! And their various husky or creaking or wave-like voices. The crowd and the dance round Aslan, for it had become a dance once more, grew so thick and rapid that Lucy was confused. She never saw where certain other people came from, who were soon capering about among the trees. One was a youth dressed only in a fawn skin, with vine leaves wreathed in his curly hair. His voice would have been almost too pretty for a boy's if it had not looked so extremely wild. You felt, as Edmund said when he saw him a few days later, there's a chap who might do anything. Absolutely anything. He seemed to have a great many names. Bromios, Basarius, and the Ram were three of them. There were a lot of girls with him as wild as he. There was even, unexpectedly, someone on a donkey, and everyone was laughing and everyone was shouting, Eeyong, Eeyong, Eeyong. Is it a romp, Aslan? cried the youth, and apparently it was. But nearly everyone seemed to have a different idea as to what they were playing. It may have been Tig, but Lucy never discovered who it was. It was rather like blind man's buff, only everyone behaved as if they were blindfolded. It was not unlike Hunt the Slipper, but the slipper was never found. What had made it more complicated was that the man on the donkey, who was old and enormously fat, began calling out at once, "Refreshments! Time for refreshments!" and falling off his donkey and being bundled on to it again by the others, while the donkey was under the impression that the whole thing was a circus and tried to give a display of walking on its hind legs. And all the time there were more and more vine leaves everywhere, and soon not only leaves but vines. They were climbing up everything. They were running up the legs of the tree people and circling around their necks. Lucy put her hands to push back her hair and found she was pushing back vine branches. The donkey was a mass of them. His tail was completely entangled, and something dark was nodding between his ears. Lucy looked again and saw it was a bunch of grapes. After that, it was mostly grapes, overhead and underfoot and all around. Refreshments, refreshments! refreshments, roared the old man. Everyone began eating. And whatever hothouses your people may have, you have never tasted such grapes. Really good grapes, firm and tight on the outside, but bursting into cool sweetness when you put them into your mouth, were one of the things the girls had never had quite enough of before. Here there were more than anyone could possibly want, and no table manners at all. One saw sticky and stained fingers everywhere, and though mouths were full, the laughter never ceased, nor the yodeling cries of "eong, eong, eong," till all of a sudden everyone felt at the same moment that the game, whatever it was, and the feast ought to be over. And everyone flopped down breathless on the ground and turned their faces to Aslan to hear what he would say next. At that moment, the sun was just rising, and Lucy remembered something and whispered to Susan, "I say, Sue, I know who they are." "Who?" "The boy with the wild face is Bacchus, and the old one on the donkey is Silenus. Don't you remember Mr. Tumnus telling us about them long ago?" "Yes, of course. But I say, Lou, what? I wouldn't have felt safe with Bacchus and all his wild girls if we'd met them without Aslan." "I should think not," said Lucy. Chapter 12. Sorcery and Sudden Vengeance. Meanwhile, Trumpkin and the two boys arrived at the dark little stone archway, which led into the inside of the mound, and two sentinel badgers, the white patches on their cheeks were all Edmund could see of them, leaped up with bared teeth and asked in snarling voices, "Who goes there?" "Trumpkin," said the dwarf, bringing the High King of Narnia out of the far past. The badgers nosed at the boys' hands. "At last," they said, "at last." "Give us a light, friends," said Trumpkin. The badgers found a torch just inside the ark, and Peter lit it and handed it to Trumpkin. "The DLF better lead," he said. "We don't know our way about this place." Trumpkin took the torch and went ahead into the dark tunnel. It was a cold, black, musty place, with an occasional bat fluttering in the torchlight and plenty of cobwebs. The boys, who had been mostly in the open air ever since the morning at the railway station, felt as if they were going into a trap or a prison. "I say, Peter," whispered Edmund, "look at those carvings on the walls. Don't they look old? And yet, we're older than that. When we were last here, they hadn't been made." "Yes," said Peter. "It makes one think." The dwarf went on ahead and then turned to the right, and then to the left, and then down some steps, and then to the left again. Then at last they saw a light ahead, light from under a door. And now, for the first time, they heard voices, for they had come to the door of the central chamber. The voices inside were angry ones. Someone was talking so loudly that the approach of the boys and the dwarf had not been heard. "Don't like the sound of that," said Trumpkin to Peter. "Let's listen for a moment." All three stood perfectly still on the outside of the door. "You know well enough," said a voice. "That's the king," whispered Trumpkin. "Why the horn was not blown at sunrise this morning. Have you forgotten that Miraz fell upon us almost before Trumpkin had gone, and that we were fighting for our lives for the space of 3 hours and more? I blew it when first I had a breathing space." "I'm not likely to forget it," came the angry voice, "when my dwarfs bore the brunt of the attack, and 1 in 5 of them fell." "That's Knickerbrick," whispered Trumpkin. "For shame, dwarf," came a thick voice. "Truffle hunters," said Trumpkin. "We all did as much as the dwarfs, and none more than the king." "Tell that tale your own way for all I care," answered Knickerbrick. "But whether it was that the horn was blown too late, or whether there was no magic in it, no help has come. You a great clerk. You, Master Magician, you know all. Are you still asking us to hang our hopes on Aslan and King Peter and all the rest of it? I must confess, I cannot deny it, but I am deeply disappointed in the results of the operation, came the answer. That'll be Dr. Cornelius, said Trumpkin. To speak plainly, said Knickerbrick, your wallet's empty, your eggs addled, your fish uncaught, your promises broken. Stand aside then and let others work. That is why the help will come, said Truffle Hunter. I stand by Aslan. Have patience, like us beasts. The help will come. It may be even now, at the door. Pah! Snarled Nickelbrick. You badgers would have us wait till the sky falls and we can all catch larks. I tell you, we can't wait. Food is running short. We lose more than we can afford at every encounter. Our followers are slipping away. And why? Asked Trouble Hunter. I'll tell you why. Because it is noised among them that we have called on the kings of old, and the kings of old have not answered. The last words Trumpkin spoke before he went, and went most likely to his death, were, if you must blow the horn, do not let the army know why you blow it, or what you hope from it. But that same evening, everyone seemed to know. You better have shoved your gray snout in a hornet's nest, Badger, than suggest that I am the blab, said Knickerbrick. Take it back, or... Oh, stop it, both of you, said the king. I want to know what it is that Knickerbrick keeps on hinting we should do. But before that, I want to know what those two strangers are whom he has brought into our council, and who stand there with their ears open and their mouths shut. They are friends of mine, said Knickerbrick, and what better right have you yourself to be here than that you are a friend of Trumpkin's and the Badgers? And what right has that old dotard in the black gown to be here except that he is your friend? Why am I to be the only one who can't bring in his friends? His Majesty is the king, to whom you have sworn allegiance, said Truffle Hunter sternly. Court manners, sneered Knickerbrick. But in this hole we may talk plainly. You know, and he knows, that this Telmarine boy will be king of nowhere and nobody in a week, unless we can help him out of this trap in which he sits. Perhaps, said Cornelius, your new friends would like to speak for themselves? You there, who and what are you? Worshipful Master Doctor, came a thin, whining voice. So you please, I am a poor old woman. I am, and very obliged to worship Dwarfship for his friendship. I'm sure His Majesty, bless his handsome face, has no need to be afraid of an old woman that's nearly doubled up from the rheumatics and hasn't 2 sticks to put under her kettle. I have some poor little skill, not like yours, Master Doctor, of course, in small spells and cantrips, and I'd be happy and glad to use against our enemies if it was agreeable to all concerned, for I hate 'em. Oh, yes, no one hates better than me. That's all most interesting and, satisfactory, said Dr. Cornelius. I think I know what you are, madam. Perhaps our other friend, Knickerbrick, would give some account of himself. A dull, gray voice, at which Peter's flesh crept, replied, I'm hunger, I'm thirst. Where I bite, I hold till I die. And even after death, they must cut out my mouthful from my enemy's body and bury it with me. I can fast 100 years and not die. I can lie 100 nights on the ice and not freeze. I can drink a river of blood and not burst. Show me your enemies. And it is in the presence of these two that you wish to disclose your plan? Said Caspian. Yes, said Knickerbrick, and by their help that I mean to execute it. There was a minute or two during which Trumpkin and the boys could hear Caspian and his two friends speaking in low voices, but could not make out what they were saying. Then Caspian spoke aloud. Well, Knickerbrick, he said, we'll hear your plan. There was a pause so long that the boys began to wonder if Knickerbrick were ever going to begin. When he did, it was in a lower voice, as if he himself did not much like what he was saying. All said and done, he muttered. None of us knows the truth about the ancient days in Narnia. Trumpkin believed none of the stories. I was ready to put them to the trial. We tried first the horn, and it has failed. If there ever was a High King Peter and a Queen Susan and a King Edmund and a Queen Lucy, then either they have not heard us, or they cannot come, or they are our enemies, or they are on the way, put in Truffle Hunter. You can go on saying that. Tamorez has fed us all to his dogs. As I was saying, we have tried one link in the chain of old legends, and it has done us no good. Well, but when your sword breaks, you draw your dagger. The stories tell of other powers beside the ancient kings and queens. How if we could call them up? If you mean Aslan, said Truffle Hunter, it's all one calling on him and the kings. They were his servants. If he will not send them, but I make no doubt he will, is he more likely to come himself? No. You're right there, said Knickerbrick. Aslan and the kings go together. Either Aslan is dead, or he's not on our side. Or else something stronger than himself keeps him back. And if he did come, how do we know he'd be our friend? He was not always a good friend to dwarfs, by all that's told. Not even to all beasts. Ask the wolves. And anyway, he was in Narnia only once that I ever heard of, and he didn't stay long. You may drop Aslan out of the reckoning. I was thinking of someone else. There was no answer, and for a few minutes it was so still that Edmund could hear the wheezing and snuffling breath of the badger. Who do you mean? Said Caspian at last. I mean a power so much greater than Aslan's that it held Narnia spellbound for years and years, if the stories are true. The White Witch! Cried all three voices all at once, and from the noise Peter guessed that the three people had leaped to their feet. Yes, said the Knickerbrick very slowly and distinctly. I mean the witch. Sit down again. Don't all take fright at the name as if you were children. We want power, and we want a power that will be on our side. As for power, do not the stories say that the witch defeated Aslan and bound him and killed him on the very stone which is over there just beyond the daylight? But they also said that he came to life again, said the badger sharply. Yes, they say, said Knickerbrick, but you'll notice that we hear precious little about anything he did afterward. He just fades out of the story. How do you explain that if he really came to life? Isn't it much more likely that he didn't, and that the stories say nothing more about him because there was nothing more to say? He established the kings and queens, said Caspian. A king who has just won a great battle can usually establish himself without the help of a performing lion, said Knickerbrick. There was a fierce growl, probably from Truffle Hunter. And anyway, said Knickerbrick continued, what came of the kings in their reign? They faded too. But it's very different with the witch. They say she ruled for 100 years, 100 years of winter. There's power, if you like. There's something practical. But heaven and earth, said the king. Haven't we always been told that she was the worst enemy of all? Wasn't she a tyrant 10 times worse than Miraz? Perhaps, said Knickerbrick in a cold voice. Perhaps she was, for you humans, if there were any of you in those days. Perhaps she was for some of the beasts. She stamped out the beavers, I dare say. At least there are none of them in Narnia now. But she got on all right with us dwarfs. I'm a dwarf, and I stand by my own people. We're not afraid of the witch. But you've joined with us, said Trufflehunter. Yes, and a lot good it has done my people so far, snapped Knickerbrick. Who is sent on all the dangerous raids? The dwarfs. Who goes short when the rations fail? The dwarfs. Who? Lies. All lies, said the badger. And so, said Knickerbrick, whose voice now rose to a scream, if you can't help my people, I'll go to someone who can. Is this open treason, dwarf? Asked the king. Put that sword back in its sheath, Caspian, said Knickerbrick. Murder at council, eh? Is that your game? Don't be a fool enough to try it. Do you think I'm afraid of you? There's 3 on my side and 3 on yours. Come on, then, snarled Trufflehunter, but he was immediately interrupted. Stop! 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 Said Dr. Cornelius. You go on too fast. The witch is dead, and all the stories agree on that. What does Knickerbrick mean by calling on the witch? That gray and terrible voice, which had spoken only once before, said, Oh, is she? And then the shrill, whining voices began. Oh, bless his heart. His dear little majesty needn't mind about the white lady. That's what we call her, being dead. The worshipful master doctor is only making a game of the poor old woman like me when he says that. Sweet master doctor, learned master doctor, who ever heard of a witch that really died? You can always bring them back. Call her up, said the gray voice. We're all ready. Draw the circle. Prepare the blue fire. Above the steadily increasing growl of the badger and Cornelius' sharp, What? Rose the voice of King Caspian like thunder. So that's your plan, Knickerbrick? Black sorcery and the calling up of an accursed ghost? And I see who your companions are, a hag and a werewolf. The next minute or so was very confused. There was an animal roaring, a clash of steel. The boys and Trumpkin rushed in. Peter had a glimpse of a horrible, gray, gaunt creature, half man and half wolf, in the very act of leaping upon a boy about his own age, and Edmund saw a badger and a dwarf rolling on the floor in some sort of cat fight. Trumpkin found himself face to face with the hag. Her nose and chin stuck out like a pair of nutcrackers. Her dirty gray hair was flying about her face, and she had just got Dr. Cornelius by the throat. At one slash of Trumpkin's sword, her head rolled on the floor. Then the light was knocked over, and it was all swords, teeth, claws, fists, and boots for about 60 seconds. Then silence. And that's where we will stop for tonight. Oh my! Let's see what happens when the light comes on next week. Thank you for joining us for another reading of Liberty Readers. We are getting closer and closer to the end, and it's getting pretty exciting. So I will see you next week.